Yet the roads as they existed were abysmal. Narrow, muddy, rutted, crooked, they wandered through hills and woods and over streams without plan or purpose. Only a handful of those streams were bridged. River fords were often guarded by men-at-arms who demanded coin or kind for the right to cross. Some of the lords whose lands the roads passed through maintained them after a fashion, but many more did not. A rainstorm would wash them out. Robber knights and broken men preyed upon the travelers who used them. Before Maegor, the poor fellows would provide a certain amount of protection to common folk upon the roads when they were not robbing them themselves. After the destruction of the stars, the realm's byways became more dangerous than ever. Even great lords traveled with an escort. To correct all these ills in a single reign would have been impossible, but Jachaerys was determined to make a start. King's Landing, it must be remembered, was very young as cities go. Before Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters had come ashore from Dragonstone, only a modest fishing village stood on the 3 hills where the Blackwater Rush flowed into Blackwater Bay. Not surprisingly, few roads of any note begin or end in modest fishing villages. The city had grown quickly in the 62 years since Aegon's conquest, and a few rude roads had sprung up with it, narrow dusty tracks that followed the shore up to Stokeworth, Rosby, and Duskendale, or cut through the hills to Maidenpool. Aside from that, there was nothing. No roads connected the king's seat with the great castles and cities of the land. King's Landing was a port, far more accessible by sea than land. That was where Jachaerys would begin. The wood south of the river was old forest, dense and overgrown, fine for hunting, poor for travel. He commanded that a road be cut through it, to connect King's Landing with Storm's End. The same road should be continued north of the city, from the Rush to the Trident and beyond, straight along the Green Fork and through the Neck, then across the wild trackless north to Winterfell and the Wall. The King's Road, the small folk named it the longest and most costly of Jaehaerys's roads, the first begun, the first completed. Others followed, the Road, the Ocean Road, the River Road, the Gold Road. Some had existed for centuries, in ruder form, but Jachaerys would remake them beyond all recognition, filling ruts, spreading gravel, bridging streams. Other roads his men created anew. The cost of all this was not inconsiderable, to be sure, but the realm was prosperous, and the king's new master of coin, Martin Tyrell aided, and abetted by his clever wife, the Apple Counter, proved almost as able as the Lord of Air had been. Mile by mile, league by league, the roads grew, for decades to come. He bound the land together, and made of 7 kingdoms, 1, read the words on the plinth of the old king's monument that stands at the Citadel of Aldtown. Mayhaps the 7 smiled on his work as well, for they continued to bless Jachaerys and Alysanne with children. In 63 AC the king and queen celebrated the birth of Vagon, their 3rd son and 7th child. A year later came another daughter, Daela. 3 years hence, Princess Sarah came into the world, red-faced and squalling. Another princess arrived in 71 AC, when the queen gave birth to her 10th child and 6th daughter, the beautiful Visera. Though born within a decade of one another, it would be hard to conceive of 4 siblings so different from one another as these younger children of Jachaerys and Alysanne. Prince Vagon was as unlike his elder brothers as night to day. Never robust, he was a quiet boy with wary eyes. Other children, and even some of the lords of the court, found him sour. Though no coward, he took no pleasure in the rough play of the squires and pages, or the heroics of his father's knights. He preferred the library to the yard, and could oft be found there reading. Princess Daela, the next oldest, was delicate and shy. Easily frightened and quick to cry, she did not speak her first word until she was almost 2. And even thereafter she was tongue-tied more often than not. Her sister Maegor became her guiding star, and she worshipped her mother, the queen, but her sister Alyssa seemed to terrify her, and she blushed and hid her face in the presence of the older boys. Princess Sarah, 3 years younger, was a trial from the very start, tempestuous, demanding, disobedient. The first word she spoke was no, and she said it often and loudly. She refused to be weaned until past the age of 4. Even as she ran about the castle, talking more than her siblings Vagon and Daela combined, she wanted her mother's milk, and raged and screamed whenever the queen dismissed another wet nurse. 7 Save us, Alysanne whispered to the king one night, when I look at her I see Arya. Fierce and stubborn, Sarah Targaryen thrived upon attention and sulked when she did not receive it. The youngest of the 4, Princess Visera, had a will of her own as well, but she never screamed and certainly never cried. Sly was one word used to describe her. Vain was another. Visera was beautiful, all men agreed, blessed with the deep purple eyes and silver gold hair of a true Targaryen, with flawless white skin, fine features, and a grace that was somehow eerie and unsettling in one so young. When one stammering young squire told her she was a goddess, she agreed. We shall return to these four princelings, and the woes they visited upon their mother and their father, in due time, but for the nonce let us take a step back to 68 AC, not long after the birth of Princess Sarah, when the king and queen announced the betrothal of their firstborn son, Aemon, Prince of Dragonstone, to Jocelyn Baratheon of Storm's End. There had been some thought, after the tragic death of Princess Daenerys, that Aemon should wed Princess Alyssa, the eldest of his remaining sisters, but Queen Alysanne firmly put the thought aside. Alyssa is for Baelon, she declared. She has been following him around since she could walk. They are as close as you and I were at their age. 2 years later, in 70 AC, Aemon and Jocelyn were joined in a ceremony that rivaled the Golden Wedding for its splendor. Lady Jocelyn at 16 years old was one of the great beauties of the realm, a long-legged, full-breasted maid with thick straight hair that fell to her waist, black as a raven's wing. Prince Aemon was 1 year younger at 15, but all agreed that they made a handsome couple. An inch shy of 6 feet tall, Jocelyn would have towered over most of the lords of Westeros, but the Prince of Dragonstone had 3 inches on her. There stands the future of the realm, Sir Giles Morrigan said when he beheld the two of them side by side, the Dark Lady and the Pale Prince. In 72 AC, a tourney was held at Duskendale in honor of young Lord Darkland's wedding to a daughter of Theomore Manderly. Both of the young princes attended, together with their sister Alyssa, and competed in the squires' melee. Prince Aemon emerged victorious, in part by dint of hammering his brother into submission. Later he distinguished himself in the lists as well, and was awarded his knight's spurs in recognition of his skills. He was 17 years of age. With knighthood now achieved, the prince wasted no time becoming a dragonrider as well, ascending into the sky for the first time not long after his return to King's Landing. His mount was blood-red Caraxes, fiercest of all the young dragons in the dragon pit. The Dragonkeepers, who knew the denizens of the pit better than anyone, called him the Blood Wyrm. Elsewhere in the realm, 72 AC also marked the end of an era in the north with the passing of Alaric Stark, Lord of Winterfell. Both of the strong sons he had once boasted of had died before him, so it fell to his grandson Edric to succeed him. Wherever Prince Aemon went, whatever Prince Aemon did, Prince Baelon would not be far behind, as the wags at court oft observed. The truth of that was proved in 73 AC, when Baelon the Brave followed his brother into knighthood. Aemon had won his spurs at 17, so Baelon must needs do the same at 16, traveling across the reach to Old Oak, where Lord Oakheart was celebrating the birth of a son with 7 days of jousting. Arrayed as a mystery knight and calling himself the Silver Fool, the young prince overthrew Lord Rowan, Sir Alan Ashford, both Fossoway twins, and Lord Oakheart's own heir, Sir Dennis, before falling to Sir Rickard Redwyn. After helping him to his feet, Sir Rickard unmasked him, bade him kneel, and knighted him on the spot. Prince Baelon lingered only long enough to partake of the feast that evening before galloping back to King's Landing to complete his quest and become a dragonrider. Never one to be overshadowed, he had long since chosen the dragon he wished to mount, and now he claimed her. Unridden since the death of the Dowager Queen Visenya 29 years before, the great she-dragon Vhagar spread her wings, roared, and launched herself once more into the skies, carrying the Spring Prince across Blackwater Bay to Dragonstone to surprise his brother Aemon and Caraxes. The Mother above has been so good to me, to bless me with so many babes, all bright and beautiful, Queen Alysanne declared in 73 AC, when it was announced that her daughter Maegil would be joining the faith as a novice. It is only fitting that I give one back. Princess Maegil was 10 years of age, and eager to take the vows. A quiet, studious girl, she was said to read from the 7-pointed star every night before sleep. Hardly had one child departed the Red Keep than another arrived, however, for it appeared that the Mother above was not yet done blessing Alysanne Targaryen. In 73 AC, she gave birth to her 11th child, a son named Gaemon, in honor of Gaemon the Glorious, the greatest of the Targaryen lords who had ruled on Dragonstone before the conquest. This time, however, the child came early, after a long and difficult labor that exhausted the queen, and made her maesters fear for her life. Gaemon was a scrawny thing as well, barely half the size his brother Vagon had been at birth 10 years earlier. The queen eventually recovered, though sad to say the child did not. Prince Daemon died a few days into the new year, not quite 3 moons old. As ever, the queen took the loss of a child hard, questioning whether or not it had been through some fault of her own that Prince Daemon had failed. Septa Lyra, her confidant since her days on Dragonstone, assured her that she was not to blame. The little prince is with the mother above now, Lyra told her, and she will care for him better than we could ever hope to, here in this world of strife and pain. That was not the only sorrow House Targaryen was to suffer in 73 AC. It will be remembered that this was also the year that Queen Rhaena died at Harrenhal. Near year's end, a shameful revelation came to light that shocked both court and city. The amiable and well-loved Sir Lucamore Strong of the Kingsguard, a favorite of the smallfolk, was found to have been secretly wed, despite the vows that he had sworn as a white sword. Worse, he had taken not 1 but 3 wives, keeping each woman ignorant of the other 2 and fathering no fewer than 16 children. On the 3 of them, in Flea Bottom and along the street of Silk where whores and panders plied their trade, men and women of low birth and lower morals took a wicked pleasure in the fall of an anointed night, and made bawdy japes about Sir Lucamore the Lusty, but no laughter was heard in the Red Keep. Jachaerys and Alysanne had been especially fond of Lucamore Strong and were mortified to learn that he had played them both for fools. His brothers of the Kingsguard were even angrier. It was Sir Ryam Redwyn who discovered Sir Lucamore's transgressions and brought them to the attention of the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, who in turn brought them to the king. Speaking for his sworn brothers, Sir Giles Morrigan declared that Strong had dishonored all they stood for, and requested that he be put to death. When dragged before the Iron Throne, Sir Lucamore fell to his knees, confessed his guilt, and begged the king for mercy. Jachaerys might well have granted him same, but the errant knight made the fatal error of appending, "For the sake of my wives and children," to his plea. As Septon Barth observed, this was tantamount to throwing his crimes in the king's face. "When I rose against my uncle Maegor, 2 of his Kingsguard abandoned him to fight for me," Jachaerys responded. "They might well have believed they would be allowed to keep their white cloaks once I'd won, perhaps even be honored with lordships and a higher place at court. I sent them to the wall instead. I wanted no oathbreakers around me, then or now. Sir Lucamore, you swore a sacred vow before gods and men to defend me and mine with your own life, to obey me, fight for me, die for me if need be. You also swore to take no wife, father no children, and remain chaste. If you could shrug aside the second vow so easily, why should I believe that you would honor the first?" Then Queen Alysanne spoke up, saying, "You made a mockery of your oaths as a knight of the Kingsguard, but those were not the only vows you broke. You dishonored your marriage vows as well, not once but thrice. None of these women are lawfully wed, so these children I see behind you are bastards one and all. They are the true innocents in this, sir. Your wives were ignorant of one another, I am told, but each of them must surely have known that you were a white sword, a knight of the Kingsguard. To that extent they share your guilt, as does whatever drunken septon you found to marry you. For them some mercy may be warranted, but for you, I will not have you near my lord, sir." There was no more to be said. As the false knight's wives and children wept or cursed or stood in silence, Jachaerys commanded that Sir Lucamore be gelded forthwith, then clapped in irons and sent off to the wall. "The night's watch will require vows from you as well," his grace warned. "See that you keep them, or the next thing you lose shall be your head." Jachaerys left it to his queen to deal with the 3 families. Alysanne decreed that Sir Lucamore's sons might join their father on the wall, if they wished. The 2 oldest boys chose to do so. The girls would be accepted as novices by the faith, if that was their desire. Only one elected that path. The other children were to remain with their mothers. The first of the wives, with her children, was given over to the charge of Lucamore's brother Bywin, who had been raised to be the lord of Harrenhal not half a year earlier. The second wife and her offspring would go to Driftmark, to be fostered by Daemon Valerion, lord of the tides. The third wife, whose children were the youngest, one still on her breast, would be sent down to Storm's End, where Gawron Baratheon and young Lord Boromund would see to their upbringing. None were ever again to call themselves strong. The queen decreed, from this day they would bear the bastard names Rivers, Waters, and Storm. For that gift, you may thank your father, that hollow knight. The shame that Lucamore the Lusty visited on the Kingsguard and the crown was not the only difficulty Jachaerys and Alysanne faced in 73 AC. Let us pause now for a moment, and consider the vexing question of their 7th and 8th born children, Prince Vagon and Princess Daela. Queen Alysanne took great pride in arranging marriages, and had put together hundreds of fruitful unions for lords and ladies from one end of the realm to another, but never had she faced so much difficulty as she did whilst searching for mates for her 4 younger children. The struggle would torment her for years, bring about no end of conflict between her and the children, her daughters in particular drive her and the king apart, and in the end bring her so much grief and pain that for a time her grace contemplated renouncing her marriage to spend the rest of her life with the Silent Sisters. The frustrations started with Vagon and Daela. Only a year apart in age, the prince and princess seemed well matched as babes, and the king and queen assumed that the two of them would eventually marry. Their older siblings Balon and Alyssa had become inseparable, and plans were already being made for them to wed. Why not Vagon and Daela as well? Be sweet to your little sister, King Jachaerys told the prince when he was 5. One day she will be your Alysanne. As the children grew, however, it became apparent that the two of them were not ideally suited. There was no warmth between them, as the queen saw plainly. Vagon tolerated his sister's presence, but never sought it out. Daela seemed frightened of her sour, bookish brother, who would sooner read than play. The prince thought the princess stupid, she thought him mean. They are only children, Jachaerys said when Alysanne brought the problem to his attention. They will warm to one another in time. They never did. If anything, their mutual dislike only deepened. The matter came to a head in 73 AC. Prince Vagon was 10 years old and Princess Daela 9 when one of the queen's companions, new to the Red Keep, teasingly asked the two of them when they would be married. Vagon reacted as if he had been slapped. I would never marry her, the boy said, in front of half the court. She can barely read. She should find some lord in need of stupid children, for that's the only sort he will ever have of her. Princess Daela, as might be expected, burst into tears and fled the hall, with her mother, the queen, rushing after her. It fell to her sister Alyssa, at 13 3 years Vagon's elder, to pour a flagon of wine over his head. Even that did not make the prince repent. You are wasting arbor gold, was all he said before stalking from the hall to change his clothing.